Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Cliff Sargent. Good to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Anthony Bourdain was a New York chef turned author, as well as a famous travel documentary host with a show on CNN. A dishwasher who became a hero to men and women all over the world. Inspired many, many cooks and chefs. Famously reached many low points with drug use in his life, in particular heroin and cocaine, and overcame both addictions, but still drank. He wrote this book, Kitchen Confidential, when he was in his 40s. This was published in 2000. He became a celebrity, an inspiration, an icon, and a hero to many. He was one of the most influential and famous chefs in the world, despite not really being a chef after this book came out, doing mostly writing and television. And he's responsible for some of the greatest, not only travel shows, but just shows period. A Cook's Tour, No Reservations, and Parts Unknown. I'd find it hard to believe that you've never heard of or seen at least part of one of those shows, but if you haven't, then please go check them out. They're amazing. It's all about traveling and educating and connecting cultures through the world of cuisine. One of the things I really loved about him, which shows up in this book, is that he was a fan of New York City, Lower East Side culture in the 80s. So the Dead Boys, television, the Voidoids. He's a big fan of William S. Burroughs, all that good stuff. A real punk rock chef and a massive success story by every metric. Someone who is really able to connect people and cultures through food. And a few weeks ago, he killed himself. His mother, Gladys Bourdain, who is still alive, was an editor at the New York Times. In 1999, Bourdain wrote an article for the New York Times called "Don't Eat Before Reading This." This became really popular and launched his career as it led to Kitchen Confidential. The full title is Kitchen Confidential: Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly. It's his journey, this blunt, street-smart, black humor commentary on his life in the restaurant industry. Absurd characters and situations everywhere. It plays out like one long Tom Waits song about working in kitchens. It was surprising and brutally honest and sharp and new. Bourdain and his book were the definition of cool. By the time this was published, he had already written some crime fiction novels, so it wasn't like this was his first rodeo. He was a fan of Nick Tosches, the New York author of dark fiction and biographies. Brilliant author, by the way. If you haven't read Dino, or I think it's called Hellfire, is that the Jerry Lee Lewis one? Or In the Hand of Dante? In the Hand of Dante, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, that's a good one. Bourdain was influenced by Marco Pierre White, particularly by White Heat and specifically those photos of him, which suggested this intensity that would shape Bourdain's personality. It's a vibrant, energized read. It's electric. It's got that beat quality, that Kerouac start and keep going and never stop quality, the Hunter S. Thompson thing, the kind of gonzo journalism factor. It feels so engaged, so enraptured with sensorial experience through food, right? By the possibilities that lie within travel and food. It feels like it was written by someone with such a, to put it in Iggy Pop's words, lust for life, that it's astounding that it's ended as it has. Sometimes it's snarky and sarcastic, sometimes it's somberly reflective. Often brash and, maybe you'd call it saucy. It's mouthy in a New York kind of way, right? It's balanced like a perfect dish. Bourdain's humor was both arrogantly self-confident and endearingly self-deprecating. This is why he was a friend to so many people, I imagine. I read this years ago in my early or mid-20s, I forget. I'm surprised at how great it holds up. It really does. And I'm not just saying that. This is when he has his first oyster when he's on vacation with his family in France. There was, I recall, still about 2 feet of water left to go before the hull of the boat settled on dry ground and we could walk about the parc. We had already polished off the brie and baguettes and downed the Evian, but I was still hungry, and characteristically said so. Monsieur Saint-Jour, on hearing this, as if challenging his American passengers, inquired in his thick Girondin accent if any of us would care to try an oyster. My parents hesitated. I doubt they realized they might actually have to eat one of the raw, slimy things we were currently floating over. My little brother recoiled in horror. But I, in the proudest moment of my young life, stood up smartly, grinning with defiance, and volunteered to be the first. And in that unforgettably sweet moment in my personal history, that one moment still more alive for me than so many of the other firsts that followed, first pussy, first joint, first day in high school, first published book, or any other thing, I attained glory. Monsieur Saint-Jour beckoned me over to the gunwale, where he leaned over, reached down until his head nearly disappeared underwater, and emerged holding a single silt-encrusted oyster, huge and irregularly shaped in his rough, claw-like fist. With a snubby, rust-covered oyster knife, he popped the thing open and handed it to me, everyone watching now, my little brother shrinking away from this glistening, vaguely sexual-looking object, still dripping and nearly alive. I took it in my hand, tilted the shell back into my mouth, and as instructed by the now beaming Monsieur Saint-Jour, and with one bite and a slurp, wolfed it down. It tasted of seawater, of brine and flesh, and somehow of the future. Everything was different now. Everything. I'd not only survived, I'd enjoyed. This, I knew, was the magic of which I had until now been only dimly and spitefully aware. I was hooked. My parents' shudders, my little brother's expression of unrestrained revulsion and amazement only reinforced the sense that I had, somehow, become a man. I had had an adventure, tasted forbidden fruit, and everything that followed in my life, the food, the long and often stupid and self-destructive chase for the next thing, whether it was drugs or sex or some other new sensation, would all stem from this moment. I had learned something, viscerally, instinctively, spiritually, even in some small precursive way, sexually, and there was no turning back. The genie was out of the bottle. My life as a cook and as a chef had begun. Food had power. He was the executive chef at the restaurant Les Halles in New York, which he discusses in the book. I just read an article that said they shut down last year due to legal problems. While the book captures the camaraderie in the kitchen and the excitement from all the different parts of his life, from first tasting an oyster in France to being addicted to heroin to going to Tokyo, it also captures the loneliness of the lifestyle. So you should read this if you're a fan of Hemingway, Hunter S. Thompson, travel fiction, Paul Bowles, William S. Burroughs, of course, Marco Pierre White, Nick Tosches, crime fiction, and anyone who knows the transcendent qualities of food or wants to discover them. And of course, anybody who wants to be a chef, or a dishwasher, or a punk rock musician who works in kitchens on the side. So on June 8th, 2018, Anthony Bourdain, with no drugs in his system, to the best of my knowledge, despite his long publicized notorious history with drugs of all kinds, in a hotel room in Strasbourg, France, quietly committed suicide by hanging himself with his bathrobe belt. I'm having a hard time with this. I don't have any answers. And I feel like it's my duty to responsibility to try and give some sort of optimistic outlook on the whole thing. I think that's true, and I do feel optimistic, but there's also a very honest and real part of me that feels very sad. I can't say much on it because it's all speculation, but I'm deeply disturbed by the action and all of the repercussions to come. You know, I've been listening to that song by Mark Kozalik called The Robin Williams Tunnel with mentioning, it's this very strange, eerie song, and it's just this piano riff with this slow drum beat and bass, like just repeated over and over again, and almost spoken word, singing but spoken word. And it's this really melancholy narration of Kozalik's journey through life, which he brings up the suicides of Robin Williams and Chris Cornell. Met a guy who actually saw the last Soundgarden concert. What's up, Will, by the way, if you're watching. But I just couldn't stop thinking about that song. I woke up every day last year with it stuck in my head in St. Pete, and now it's stuck in my head again because of Bourdain, because it's just this line of, it's like every year we have a suicide of somebody, some big figure, and we're all confused why, what the deal is, why. I think the last episode to air before this happened was the trip to Hong Kong in his show where he met his hero, Chris Doyle, good guy, nice guy. I went on that escalator with the film crew with Chris shooting as they did too. It was very strange to watch that. It's a little strange. I actually tried to get him to be part of Story of the Eye at one point. Bourdain. That was a shame that didn't work out. Already it seems washed over. Everyone moves on. You know. So for me, this is, I don't want to sound too dramatic because, you know, I didn't know him personally, but but I had a lot of respect for him. A lot of respect for him. I really thought this was somebody who had achieved a life worth living, you know, who had really just gotten all of it right, you know, who had really just overcome against all fucking odds, everything. I mean, he overcame just addiction, just, it seems like fate itself. He kind of just like wrenched it out of the ether and built it to his liking. It was just amazing. I don't, yeah. It's kind of like a seismic shift for me. I'm doing okay, but for me, it demands a giant recalibration of life goals, ambitions, and ideals. As in, okay, if that was not a life worth living, I've told people that I wanted to be the Anthony Bourdain of books. I actually used that sort of as a motto. Yeah, I wanted to be the Anthony Bourdain of books. I still do, you know? I mean, the most disturbing thing about this is that it seems to say that you can still have a family, have a daughter, have your mother still be living when you are 61, an enviable social position and career, eat delicious food, as much of it as you like, have no need of creative compromise, travel all over the world, be loved by countless people, be like a father figure or a big brother figure, an awesome influential monolith, and still be so sad that you can kill yourself by hanging yourself in a hotel room with your bathrobe belt. It's just, it's really disturbing. You know, if your body gets weighed down with toxins enough, I mean, certainly your mental processes are part of your body, so I mean, one directly influences the other. They both, you know, they're not mutually exclusive. Your body and mind are the result of accumulation, of years of certain patterns of thinking and modes of being, of styles of thought and living. So if you're constantly in a dark place and reveling in being in a dark place, there are severe consequences. Not saying he was doing it on purpose, not saying anything. I know nothing. I have no clue what his situation was. I have no idea if he was clinically depressed, if he had severe depression. I don't know. I have no idea. I've certainly stayed in dark places for longer than I've needed to, much longer. This is one of the tragic things about getting older. You watch people you love and admire die. But while we're living, things always change. Always. No matter how much you believe things can't get better, they do, as long as you're living. If you need help, give the number a call. Stay away from the booze. I drink wine, but seriously, that shit will take its financial and psychological toll. Be very careful. Very. Everyone has an interior struggle. Everyone is going through things we'll never know or fully understand. We never really know anyone entirely. It's a blessing and a curse. All you can do is be there for people and reach out for help when you're going through the rough times. This is unresolved and will probably remain unresolved, and all I can do is speculate. This illuminates the reality that we are all fundamentally alone. When it really comes down to it, we have to be cool with ourselves. Because if you're not cool with yourself on the inside, if you're not okay, if you haven't worked everything out internally, then it doesn't matter what's on the outside or how good life is, you know? I mean, if you're depressed, I think this guy Robert Sapolsky, I'm reading this book, but he was giving a lecture and he said, like, depression is about the worst disease you can get, because even though everything is going wonderfully in your life, you're unable to feel good about it. That's one of the worst possible things I could think of. But literature helps. It brings us together in ways that nothing else does. You can see the deepest into someone's mind and soul by reading their book, you know? You don't want to get too caught up in admiring people, but you also want to have faith in people, right? You want to have someone to look up to, like some people, somewhere. Kind of running out here, guys. Seriously, they're all dead. I don't want to seem overly depressed because that's a lie, but I don't want to seem dishonestly optimistic about it because that's a lie too. I feel god-awful about it. I'm in the same boat as everyone. I'm rethinking the whole thing. I have no idea. No clue. I learned from his show. I learned from his books. I learned from his music tastes, his insight, his drive, his ambition, his approach to life, his openness to experience and different cultures. He was my hero. Kitchen Confidential is better than food. Anthony Bourdain was better than food. And I'm going to leave it there. Take care of your mental health. Don't go too dark. Don't stay there. Great to see you as always. Take care of yourselves and have a good night. Ciao.